Okay, so hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to continue with the last two parts of 10.1 untuk extremum problem. Okay, so for the second last part, you have to be able to sketch the graph of a polynomial function menggunakan whatever concept we have learned in 10.1 iaitu stationary point and then check maximum and minimum. So the steps are as shown on the screen right now. So to sketch the graph of a polynomial function, we are going to follow these 4 steps. Yang mana for the first step, we are going to find the x-intercept. So you have to remember this is when y is equal to 0 ataupun nama lain dia adalah zeros of your fx ataupun function. Then we have the second step, we need to find our y-intercept. So y-intercept is just pintasan dipaksi y when x is equal to 0. After that, step 3, we are going to find all the turning points. So what are the turning points? Turning points is actually our stationary point. So we are going to follow the same steps, and then after that we are going to determine the nature. Maksud the nature here is referring to either its maximum atau minimum. So if you recall, the steps were, if you are given fx, then we are going to have to find our f prime x. Then we use the concept f prime x must be equal to 0. You are going to get your value for x. Then please find your value of y to get your stationary point. So stationary point is going to be the coordinate x and y. Selepas itu, we are going to use second derivative test. Find your second derivative and then put your stationary point into the second derivative. We are going to check whether it's maximum or minimum. So that is more or less the flow of your steps. Then finally, the fourth step and the last step for sketching is just to sketch the graph menggunakan apapun info yang kita dah dapat. Okay, so let's take a look at example 1, where in this question, you need to sketch the graph of the function. So to sketch the graph of this given function, please remember step yang pertama, what we are going to do is we are going to find our x-intercept. So to find x-intercept, we are going to use y equals to 0. You get negative x cubed plus 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. We can multiply that whole equation with negative 1. So I get x cubed minus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. So just use your EQN. Bila kita tekan EQN, you are going to get nilai x kita, zeros kita adalah x is going to be negative 2 and x is equal to 1. Okay, so in this case, you only have two roots, two zeros, iaitu negative 2 and 1. No problem. We are going to proceed with step 2. So for the second step, we are going to look for our y-intercept, yang mana this is when x is equal to 0. So I have f of x is going to become 0 plus 0 minus 2. So that is my y-intercept, iaitu negative 2. Then with that, we are going to move on to step 3. So untuk step 3, this is quite special, yang mana step 3 adalah step yang paling banyak kita kena cari, iaitu first thing, find your f prime x. You are going to get negative 3x squared plus 3. And then please remember, we are going to use the concept where f prime x is going to be 0. So I have negative 3x squared plus 3 is going to be 0. And then continuing that on the next page, I'm going to have 3x squared is equal to 3. So x squared is just 1. So what is my x? X will be plus and minus 1. Yang ni don't forget. After you get your value of x, we need to find our stationary point. So when x is equal to 1, I'm going to have f of 1 is just negative 1 cubed plus 3 times 1 and then minus 2. So what we are going to get here is just 0. After that, when I have x is equal to negative 1, I'm going to have f of negative 1 is equal to negative times negative 1 cubed plus 3 times negative 1 minus 2. That is going to become negative 4. Okay, so I have 2 points here, which is 1, 0, as well as negative 1, negative 4. So now we know that my stationary points adalah 1, 0 and negative 1, negative 4. I just got my stationary point. I have yet to determine the maximum and minimum. So the next step is to find my second derivative. f double prime x. So my f double prime x is going to become, look at your first derivative, differentiate the second time, so you get negative 6x. So we are going to test both points. Jadi at 0.10, I'm going to have f double prime 1 will be just negative 6 times 1, which is negative 6. So that value is something yang less than 0. So my conclusion here will be 10 is a maximum point. Okay, the same thing happened at the second point, iaitu negative 1, negative 4. I'm going to have f double prime of negative 1. That is going to be negative 6 times negative 1, which is just 6. So that value is something yang greater than 0. And I have my conclusion, negative 1, negative 4 will be minimum point. Okay, now I have all the info that I need. Can I move on to step 4? Jawapannya yes. We are going to look at step 4, yang mana stepnya adalah to just sketch the graph. Okay, so these are my axes, x and y axis. I have my origin there. So if you look at the info earlier, what I got adalah nilai root. My root adalah negative 2 and 1. So this is a cubic function. Untuk a cubic function, we know that the shape is going to become something like this because it is a negative cubic. And then I have two roots. So meaning there is one of them is going to be the repeated roots. And then I have my y-intercept pada nilai negative 2. Then I have 2 points untuk maximum and minimum, which is 1, 0. It is a maximum point. And then use negative 1, negative 4, which is a minimum point. Now kita akan sort of plot our points. So plotting my point will give me somewhat here that is going to be 1, 0, my maximum point. Okay, pada nilai 1. And then I have this is negative 1. This will be negative 2. Negative 1, 4 will be somewhere here. Sorry, negative 1, negative 4. That will be my minimum point, iaitu negative 1, negative 4. Okay, so now I know the shape. We can lakarkan sahaja graph kita. So for this one, I usually tell my students not to plot the points first, because if you plot, then you are going to face a problem yang mana students tend to kejar kat mana dia dah plot tu. So kalau you nak plot dulu, in this case boleh, tapi you have to make sure your graph is very smooth and tidak jadi bentuk yang pelik. So what do I mean by bentuk pelik? This is curve jangan jadi nampak macam bentuk V tajam ke. So you have to make sure that part you tak that part you tidak dapat bentuk yang pelik lah. Okay, so I'm going to erase this part, making sure my graph is as smooth as it can be. Okay, so that will be your shape yang mana you have to replot. That is going to be your point. So please label that is the graph for fx and we are done. Okay, so for example 2, I'm going to leave that for you to try by yourself. Yang ni tak ada masalah, just follow step kita. Step 1 is going to find x-intercept. Step kedua is find your y-intercept. And then step ketiga, we are going to find stationary point as well as which one yang minimum ataupun maximum. And then step keempat terus masuk pada sketching. Alright, so for this one, you are going to get a shape something like this. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Because kita ada x kuasa 4 yang positif, so you are going to get something like this. Okay, not exactly the exact shape, tapi yang tu adalah basic shape untuk you tengok jawapan you nanti betul ataupun salah. Okay, so the same thing happened for the exercise. Please make sure you try to sketch that by yourself. And then for the last part of 10.1, we are going to look at optimization problems. These are the problems that you have looked at during your SPM as well as untuk SES 3 during your second semester. So for optimization problems, we are going to look at problem solving yang mana you are going to have long questions, ayat dalam bentuk ayat, yang mana again the concept that we are going to use is still the same as earlier, yang mana we are trying to maximize something ataupun we are trying to minimize something. However, apa yang kita nak maximize, apa yang kita nak minimize adalah a quantity such as volume, it can be area, it can be perimeter, it can be anything. Okay, so from there, kita ada satu keperluan untuk tahulah formula. Sebab tu if you realise in the formula sheet, kita ada volume of sphere, surface area of sphere, volume of cylinder, surface area of cylinder punya formula. Okay, so we are going to use all that. Konsep still sama, we are trying to find di mana kita punya first derivative is going to be 0 and then we are going to get the value of x. Daripada situ kita akan teruskan dengan second derivative test and then kita tengok nilai dia greater than 0 atau less than 0 untuk dapatkan minimum atau maximum. So, the steps are as follow, yang mana kita ada 6 steps. So, for the first step, we are going to draw a diagram. So, I'm going to tell you directly now, drawing a diagram won't give you any mark. Tak ada sebarang markah. Tetapi, that step is very crucial because without drawing a diagram related to the problem given to you, you won't be able to see clearly apa yang soalan minta. So, I put this as a very important step. So, saya wajibkan semua orang untuk draw a diagram. And then once you manage to draw the diagram, please make sure you do label the parts that are important such as radius, height ataupun nilai-nilainya lah, panjang, lebar dan seterusnya. Okay, so info berkenaan benda-benda yang kita nak label tersebut selalunya sudah diberi dalam soalan. The next step is to write an equation. So what are the equations that you need to write? Equation tersebut will be related to the quantity yang kita nak maksimumkan atau minimumkan. So one more thing that you need to remember, soalan doesn't always mention maximum and minimum. Sometimes it might say largest. So largest mean maximum. It's actually the same meaning. The question might say the smallest. So bila smallest, it's referring to minimizing something, minimizing a value. Okay, next step, step ketiga, we are going to express the quantity yang dalam equation kita tadi tu dalam single variable. So an example that I can give here is, for example, volume of a cylinder. Volume of a cylinder, kita ada pi r square darabkan dengan h. So for this volume, you have two variables which are r as well as h. So this step requires you to somehow change r menjadi h ataupun h menjadi r. So that now v kita akan jadi in term of only one variable. Why? Because we need to move on to the next step yang mana we need to differentiate whatever you have earlier. So kalau dekat sini dia guna differentiate fx, our function tak semestinya fx. When you are given problem solving, mungkin dia melibatkan volume. So bila kita nak differentiate volume, let's say saya ada volume of a sphere 1/3 pi r cube. Volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi r cube. So daripada sini, now I have v in term of r. Janganlah differentiate dapat f prime x. Kita differentiate akan dapat dv by dr. Okay, and then next step, step kelima, we are going to let the whole derivative itu menjadi equal to 0 so that you can find the values of your variable. After that, we are going to use second derivative untuk test whether that quantity is maximum or minimum. So those are the 6 steps we are going to use. Let's look at the example. So for the first example, we are given the simplest example yang mana tak ada step 1. You cannot draw any diagram for this question. So we are going to skip step 1. Let's read the question first. The question says find two positive numbers. So we are dealing with two numbers whose sum is 20. So the next info yang diberi adalah jumlahnya mesti 20 and then we know that the product will be maximum. So what else other than the 6 steps earlier? Saya selalu pesan pada student, do take out all the info. Okay, so usually student dia tend to baca daripada perkataan pertama di sini sampai habis. that is the first step yang student semua buat, and then dia pun hadapi masalah. I cannot answer because I don't remember whatever the question asked for. So for the first time reading the question, boleh you baca dari awal sampai akhir. However, to solve the question, you have to read part by part, yang mana you jumpa sahaja info. My advice is to take out the info, tulis. Especially jika info dalam bentuk ayat, please make sure you write it in mathematical sentence. Contohnya, kita nak cari two positive numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the two positive numbers as X dan juga Y. So now I know my two numbers dah ada nama. Nama dia X dan juga Y. So dah diberitahu whose sum is going to be 20. So sum siapa? Jumlah siapa yang 20 tu? X tambah Y mesti 20. Nombor yang pertama dengan nombor yang kedua, bila kita jumlahkan mesti dapat 20. Saya belum masuk lagi step yang kedua sebab that is yet to be the equation for the quantity that I need to maximize. Yang saya nak maximize is the product of the two numbers. So we are going to just label that as P. Product of the two numbers which is given by X and Y. Ini yang saya nak maksimumkan. Okay, I need to find the maximum product. So that will be my step 2. Step yang ketiga, I'm going to have to make it into a single variable. So if you look here, I have two variables, X as well as Y. How do I change? Di situlah datangnya kegunaan this equation tadi. Kenapa dia bagi satu lagi info yang nampak macam tidak berkaitan? Because from there, I'm going to have X is equal to 20 minus Y. Atau you can also make it as Y as a subject. Tapi saya nak jadikan X. And then I'm going to put that into that original equation yang saya nak maximizekan. And that will give me P is equal to 20 minus Y times Y. So that will be just 20Y minus Y squared. Now I have P in term of only Y, one variable, a single variable. Can I move on to step 4? Jawapannya yes. Yang mana untuk step 4, we are going to differentiate that equation. I'm going to differentiate P with respect to Y. So I have 20 minus 2Y. Step yang kelima, we are going to take that derivative and put it equal to 0. So dP by dy is going to be 0. So I have 20 minus 2y is equal to 0. 2y is 20. Hence, y will be 10. Dah siap dapat nilai y. What do I do? Jawapannya bukan cari nilai x. Di sini lain sikit je. Kita tweak sikit, kita ubah sikit. Yang mana step yang ke-6 is directly buat second derivative test. To do that, I need my second derivative. So, d2p over dy kuasa 2. Daripada my first derivative, I'm going to have negative 2. Okay, so what we are going to do is substitute. When y is equal to 10, what happened to my second derivative? d2p over dy kuasa 2 is going to remain negative 2 because it doesn't depend on y. Okay, so bila saya dapat begini, we know that this value is negative. So my conclusion will be, kita tak tulis y is a maximum point, y is a minimum point. Tak ada This is not a point. This is problem solving. So that is either length ataupun value of a number ataupun radius ataupun ketinggian untuk depends on soalan lah. So in this case, it is a positive number. So what we are going to do for the conclusion is y equals to 10. Will give us apa yang soalan minta, iaitu produk yang maximum. So, we'll give the maximum. Maximum apa? Yang ni you tengok kat sini. Tengok kepala second derivative tu. P kan? Maksudnya maximum P lah. P itu apa? P itu adalah product. Okay, so that is how you conclude kan. Dah siap? Yes, that is the end of step 6. Tetapi, please go back to the question and read it properly. The question asks for the two positive numbers. So since I let my two positive numbers as x and y, the question says actually secara tidak langsung find x dan juga y. So I've got my y. How do I find my x? So since y is equal to 10, I know x is 20 minus y. So that is 20 minus 10. Jadi x is equal to 10. And my conclusion is x equals to 10, y is also equals to 10. So that will be the end of this problem. Okay, so let's move on to the next example. Untuk example yang kedua, this is slightly harder than what we have earlier in example 1. Sebab example 1, soalannya tak perlu diagram. Now, kita ada diagram. If you read the question properly, we have a cylinder. We have an empty sphere. Yang mana apa yang kita buat adalah a cylinder is placed inside that empty sphere. So, janganlah lukis sesuka hati. Oh, ni sphere. Kita lukis 2D je Sphere tu macam bola, macam bumi. So, kita akan lukis sphere itu akan sentuh kita punya hujung sphere. Cylinder akan sentuh hujung sphere kita. Jangan pula lukis. Okay, miss, saya nak lukis saya punya cylinder, dia duduk kat tengah-tengah macam ni je. Tak boleh Dia mesti sentuh. Okay, so if you look at the next slide, you are given, this will be the diagram. So, that is your step 1. It has been labelled there. Okay, now, daripada situ, kita ada maklumat lain yang diberi. Yang mana we have radius 10 cm. So, radius of 10 cm refers to this thing. Sphere kita Sebab itu, if you look at the diagram, labeling of the radius is from the center of the sphere towards the edges of the sphere. Kita akan sentuh. So, please remember, radius can be in any direction. You boleh pergi arah mana-mana sekalipun, nilai dia tetap 10. So, why does the diagram dilukiskan 10 tu dekat situ? Jawapannya adalah sebab kita nak dapatkan segitiga. Segitiga itu akan membantu kita untuk relate H dengan R. Okay, and then we need to find the largest volume of the cylinder. So, itu yang kita nak. Sebab itu, if you look again at the next one, kita dah diberi step yang kedua, iaitu the volume of cylinder given by V equals to pi R square H. Okay, so daripada step 1 dan step 2 yang dah dibuatkan untuk awak, please also look at this. You have been told here, kita akan let R, small r be the radius of my cylinder. So, this is radius of my cylinder. And then H adalah height of cylinder. Yang mana that will be my height of cylinder. And then V besar adalah volume of cylinder. So, from the diagram, we can take out that small triangle. Okay, so the hypotenuse will be radius of the sphere 10. And then kita punya base akan jadi R, which is radius of our cylinder. What about the height of the right angle triangle? Kita akan dapat H per 2 because that is exactly half of the height. So, H per 2. Now, daripada sini, untuk kita masuk step yang ketiga, I need to write V equals to pi R square H menjadi satu variable sahaja. Maklumat untuk ubah menjadi single variable comes from this triangle yang mana I need to somehow relate. Kita nak relate guna apa? We are going to use Pythagoras theorem. Okay, so what does Pythagoras theorem say? We are going to have A square plus B square is equal to C square. C square adalah hypotenuse kita. So, I'm going to have R square plus H over 2 square is equal to 10 square. So, dari sini, I can simplify. You can choose nak jadikan H subject ataupun R square subject. So, I'm going to choose R as a subject. I'm going to have R square is equal to 100 minus H square over 4. Atau you can also write that as R square equals to 400 minus H square over 4. So, I'm going to use this one, the first one. Okay, so putting that into R square, tak perlu cari R lah sebab kita nak guna R square as it is. I'm going to have now V is pi darab 100 minus H square over 4 darab dengan H. I can simplify that to become pi 100H minus H cube over 4. Okay, selesai. Now, that is a single variable untuk V. V in term of H sahaja. Masuk step yang keempat, we are going to differentiate that. So, I'm going to have dV by dH lah. H is the only variable left. So, differentiating that, pi akan remain as a constant outside. So, differentiating whatever inside the bracket will be 100 minus, bawa kuasa ke depan, so 3/4 H kuasa 2. That is step yang keempat. Step yang kelima says I'm going to have to take dv by dh is equal to 0. So pi darab 100 minus 3 over 4 h square will be 0. Pi akan hilang. So 100 minus 3 over 4 h square is 0. So I can solve that untuk cari nilai h, yang mana 3 over 4 h square is just 100. So h square is just 400 divided by 3. So what is my h? Ingat, when you take square root, kena ada plus and minus. So h is plus minus square root 400 over 3. You kena tulis ini dahulu, baru kita akan concludekan. Tetapi since h must be positive, kita tahu h will only take the value positive square root of 400 over 3. Yang mana this can also be written as that is actually h adalah 20 over 3. Okay, so tak perlu rationalize denominator dulu pun, tak apa. Just leave it at that. So step yang kelima selesai. Let's move on to step yang keenam. Untuk step keenam, for the last step, I'm going to have to find my second derivative, which is d2v by dh square. Differentiating whatever I have here untuk kali kedua will give me pi still remains outside, and then inside I'm going to have negative 3 over 2h. Okay, so daripada sini, what I'm going to do is, when I have h is equal to 20 over 3, my second derivative will be negative 3 over 2 pi h kita akan ganti 20 over 3. So kita akan dapat jawapan second derivative akan jadi negative 60 over 2/3 pi. So if you calculate this, you try to calculate using your calculator. Kalau tak nampak, jadikan perpuluhan. So that is going to be something yang negatif. Sebab pi positif, 60 per 2/3 pun positif. Negatif kat depan tu yang akan jadikan dia negatif. So we know that as a conclusion, I'm going to have, ingat, kita takkan tulis maximum point. Tidak. You can just write the volume will be maximum. Bila kita tahu h kita adalah 20 per 3. Okay, so macam saya nak tahu kat sini saya kena tak volume. Jawapannya ni, tengok kepala kita punya second derivative. Atau tengok soalan. Soalan nak kita maximize volume of our cylinder. So dah siap ke? Jawapannya belum. Again, go and read your question properly. Dia nak cari find the largest volume. So kita nak cari, di sini adalah maximum volume. Kena cari. Kena kira dia nak Vmax tu berapa. So we are going to just put everything into our formula. So that is just another step yang mana kita nak cari Vmax of our cylinder will be equal to, ingat kita punya formula adalah pi r square h. So if you needed nilai r, I would suggest you to calculate that outside. Sebab kalau you terus masukkan, ada possibility you salah lah. So remember, r tadi adalah bersamaan dengan 100 minus h kuasa 2 per 4. Itu adalah r kuasa 2. So what we are going to do is, we are going to calculate first 100 tolak 1 per 4 darab h kuasa 2, which is 20 over 3 kuasa 2. So you can just calculate that. And then kita akan dapat r square adalah 200 per 3. Just put those value, nilai r square dan juga nilai h into my formula. So pi remains the same. R square is 200 over 3 times dengan h iaitu 20 over 3. Okay, so just calculate that, and then what you are going to get as your answer is volume kita adalah 4000 per 3. Sorry, 3/3 pi. Unit jangan lupa because we are finding volume, so unit kita mesti kuasa 3, so unit cube. So that will be the final step untuk solving this kind of question. Walaupun step yang kita diberi secara general tadi stop pada step 6, kita ada extra one step sebab soalan minta. Kalau soalan tak minta, then stop there lah pada step 6. Tapi sebab soalan specifically minta nilai volume, you kena bagilah volume yang dia nak. Okay, so again, example 3, example 4 as well as the exercise, I will leave that for you to try by yourself. So supposed to be no problem sebab the diagrams have been drawn for you except untuk exercise. So daripada diagram yang diberi, dia dah bantu you macam mana nak start. If you cannot, then you can ask me untuk consultation.